In Season 1 of Squid Game, our protagonist, Seong Gi-hun, joined the deadly competition with the goal of getting rich quick. After surviving the harrowing, syrup-drenched games, fueled by a newfound sense of righteousness, he decides to return to the game, not to play, but to seek revenge on those behind it and bring them to justice. Fresh off the plane, Gi-hun receives an anonymous call. The caller, seemingly aware of Gi-hun's every move, asks, "Where do you think you're going?" Gi-hun, having nowhere else to go, looks around for the hidden caller, provoking him. "Stop hiding like a rat. Come out here." The voice simply replies, "You should have stayed on the plane. You'll regret this decision." Unfazed by the threat, Gi-hun, fully aware of his own intention, retorts, "I'll find you, no matter what," and hangs up. He gets into a taxi, contemplates for a moment, and then directs the driver to Seoul. Gi-hun buys a new box cutter and, back in a bathroom, strips naked. Feeling around his body, he discovers something lodged behind his ear. Recognizing it as a Squid Game device, he resolutely cuts it out. Strawberry syrup drips onto his leg and old scar as he successfully removes the object. Suddenly, young Kang Cheol opens the door, startled by the sight of the naked man. Gi-hun calmly asks, "Can you come back in 5 minutes?" The boy nods and leaves. Gi-hun immediately discards the tracking chip that has been monitoring him. The scene shifts to a hospital where the beeping of Jun-ho's life support machine fills the air. A memory surfaces of the last time he saw his brother, receiving a dalgona candy. Jun-ho slowly opens his eyes to see his worried mother calling for a doctor. What will this young policeman accomplish in his second chance at life? We jump forward 2 years after the conclusion of the mysterious games. Jun-ho, back as a traffic officer, pulls over 2 scooter riders without helmets and issues them a ticket. The angered boyfriend curses while his girlfriend is captivated by the handsome officer's looks. Despite the female attention, Jun-ho remains impassive as he hands the ticket to the boyfriend, who speeds off, leaving his love-struck girlfriend behind. Suddenly, someone calls out to Jun-ho, asking, "Did you transfer here just to be called officer?" It's his former captain. Jun-ho innocently asks, "Is it milk into tea, or tea into milk?" Ignoring his captain's attempts to persuade him to return to the Major Crimes Unit, Jun-ho remains focused on his food, prompting his exasperated captain to remark, "Are you still sulking about that?" The captain reveals he used all his connections to investigate the mysterious island Jun-ho described, but found nothing. Jun-ho simply replies, "I'll be forever grateful," and bows his head. His captain, after all these years, still repeats his mantra, "Firefighters fight fire with water, police fight crime with evidence." Suddenly, the captain asks about the man who shot Jun-ho, but Jun-ho sadly claims to have forgotten. Later, while changing, Jun-ho looks at his scar, remembering the face of his long-lost brother. Before betraying his brother, Jun-ho resolves to uncover the truth himself. The scene changes to a young couple seeking a hotel room. Desperate for a place to stay, the only hotel in the area is dark and unresponsive to their calls. They leave, unaware that inside is Gi-hun's secret base. Suddenly, a doorbell rings. Gi-hun cautiously investigates and receives a Squid Game business card. He opens the door to find the masked front man, flanked by 2 literal game figures, causing Gi-hun to wake up in terror. The horrific experiences from the death game have left him deeply scarred. Having witnessed so much death, Gi-hun struggles to return to his former self. Mr. Kim brought a box of sugar and some milk to visit and check on the main character's health. Despite his weakened state, the man was only focused on the search. Mr. Kim reported that he had people searching every subway line, but the mysterious man from the subway still hadn't appeared. Mr. Kim expressed his frustration, having searched for 2 years with no trace of the man, his whereabouts remaining a complete mystery. Gi-hun remained determined, urging him to expand the search to more lines, though it would be costly. Mr. Kim's eyes lit up at the sight of the wad of cash. Gi-hun recounted how the man had given him the business card 3 years prior. If nothing had changed, the man was recruiting players. He gripped Mr. Kim's hand and said they couldn't miss this once-a-year opportunity. Seeing Gi-hun's sincerity and the pile of money, Mr. Kim quickly agreed, promising to find the man. With the heavy bag of cash in hand, Mr. Kim ordered his men to recruit more people for this difficult task. His close associate, Woo Seok, expressed confusion. Mr. Kim admitted to being skeptical about the story of the island, but reasoned that any job with this kind of money was worth doing. To further incentivize the search, he offered a reward of $500 million to whoever found the man. The scene shifts to Jun-ho at the docks, checking on with an old fisherman. The fisherman quipped that in good weather he fishes, and in bad weather, he looks for spirits. He was all too familiar with Jun-ho's health inquiries, a prelude to their search for the mysterious island. The old man asked where they were headed today. They had been searching the sea for a year and a half, but the young man remained persistent. He lamented saving Jun-ho from drowning, now burdened by this debt. "Oh, my poor fate," he exclaimed. Meanwhile, at the front man's headquarters, Woo Seok addressed a large group of employees. He tasked them with finding a well-dressed man carrying a briefcase full of cash. This man played didakji with strangers in the subway and then handed out a triangular business card. They were to split into groups and search every subway line, taking photos as proof of their efforts, leaving no station unchecked. The team who found the man would receive a 500 million won reward. The group, energized and armed with didakji paddles, set off to find the mysterious man. Gi-hun closely monitored their progress, tracking their locations with numerous phones and tablets. They questioned people, described the didakji game, and searched the briefcases of well-dressed men, not forgetting to take selfies documenting their faces and the stations they visited. Simultaneously, Jun-ho continued his relentless search, diving around islands for any clue about the deadly game. As night fell, both Gi-hun's army and Jun-ho came up empty-handed. Driven by their determination, they continued their search day after day. The prolonged, fruitless search eroded their smiles. Jun-ho's reckless searching in dangerous weather angered the old fisherman, warning him that the whirlpools could kill them both. The old man continued his usual sales pitch for charcoal, while Jun-ho offered his thanks. Discouraged, Jun-ho announced he would stop searching, a familiar refrain to the old fisherman. He knew the young man would be back next week. Seeing Jun-ho's profuse gratitude, the old man smiled, admitting he'd grown accustomed to it. He felt a pang of sadness at the prospect of Jun-ho not returning. Having shared so much time at sea, they had become unlikely friends. He suggested Jun-ho quit his police job and join him on the boat. Back at the subway station, Woo Seok stared glumly at a piece of bread. "This is a bit much, boss. Manual laborers eat better," he grumbled. He questioned the point of searching for this strange, unknown person. The boss assured him he'd thought it through. Seong Gi-hun might be crazy, but he wouldn't burn billions of won searching for someone who didn't exist. As Woo Seok continued to voice his doubts, a sudden snap echoed through the station. On the other side of the platform, the legendary, well-dressed didakji player appeared. At the same time, Gi-hun received the call. He grabbed his gun, ready to finally meet the man he'd been searching for. He barked orders to his men to follow the target until he arrived. Two men pursued the target while the man in the hat sighed, looking at the business card, then received a call from his girlfriend, Jun-hee. At the hospital's maternity ward, Jun-hee called her boyfriend, but he didn't answer. Looking at the business card, unsure of what to do, she slipped away when the doctor called her name. Meanwhile, a sharp-dressed man bought a large quantity of bread and lottery tickets at a bakery. He then went to a park where homeless people gathered. Politely approaching an older man, he offered him a small gift, a choice between the bread and a 1 billion won lottery ticket. The man chose the ticket, but luck wasn't on his side. Mr. Choi watched with curiosity as the well-dressed man offered the same choice to each homeless person. Despite their hunger, they all opted for the lottery ticket, hoping for a windfall. The suited man then dramatically dumped the uneaten bread in the middle of the park and proceeded to stomp on it, declaring they had chosen to reject sustenance. Woo Seok filmed the scene, capturing the man's apparent frustration with their gambling over basic needs. At that same moment, Gi-hun sped towards the park on his motorcycle, but was stopped by the police. A law-abiding citizen, he complied. Coincidentally, the traffic unit was led by Jun-ho, who meticulously guided his junior colleague through the ticketing process, unknowingly missing a chance encounter with a kindred spirit. Meanwhile, the suited man took a taxi and left. Mr. Choi followed, alerting Gi-hun. Upon receiving the news, Gi-hun grabbed his ticket and sped away, leaving the stunned officer behind. Jun-ho then recognized the name as someone familiar. Mr. Choi, seeing Gi-hun's hesitation, decided to take him on. 2 against 1? He wasn't worried. However, he was quickly overpowered by Gi-hun. Simultaneously, Jun-ho investigated Gi-hun's file, believing he held a crucial clue. Gi-hun arrived at the location indicated on the device, finding only traces of syrup. Unbeknownst to him, his target observed everything from a rooftop. Returning, the man removed the blindfolds from two gangsters and calmly proposed a game of two-handed rock-paper-scissors, a deadly version of Russian roulette. One candy represented a loaded chamber, giving 5 to 6 odds of survival. The gangsters, initially lucky, continued playing. The man then increased the stakes, adding more candy, shifting the odds to 6 to 5. Despite their initial camaraderie, one had to lose. Mr. Choi drew the fatal candy. The man then calmly discussed business with Woo Seok. Jun-ho discovered a connection between Gi-hun and the Sunshine Center, breaking in through a window. He was shocked to find a mannequin and the familiar business card. Searching the files, he found Gi-hun's debt paperwork and the Pink Motel's registration. Gi-hun returned home to find the lights on. Inside, he found the suited man and thanked him for the invitation to the games, which had made him rich. The man claimed to be just a messenger. Gi-hun, however, was fixated on the mastermind behind the deadly games. After listening to Gi-hun's insults, the man recounted his 17th birthday, when he'd killed a bull. He'd disposed of many bodies like Gi-hun's until he received a gun. The thrill of power consumed him until he executed a familiar face, his own father, despite his pleas. He then realized his true calling. Gi-hun, disgusted, lashed out. The man, habitually, proposed a game of Russian roulette. The answers Gi-hun sought, he claimed, were in his pocket. Shoot him and take them. But doing so, he taunted, would make Gi-hun as worthless as the rest. Jun-ho, hearing gunshots, immediately rushed inside, untied his underling, and demanded Gi-hun's location. He then went to the room, pointed a gun at Gi-hun, and ordered him to put his hands up. "Police, you're under arrest as a murder suspect. You have the right to an attorney and the right to remain silent." Just then, Woo Seok knocked Jun-ho unconscious with a single blow. Interrogated by Gi-hun, Woo Seok recounted his search for the mysterious man playing Didakji. Though they hadn't met face-to-face, they had collaborated while scouring train stations. Woo Seok praised the man as admirable for voluntarily settling his debts. Glancing at the handsome man in the suit, Woo Seok regretted not killing him himself to avenge his boss. Hearing his lament, Gi-hun realized this was an ally and lowered his guard. Looking at the business card, he learned of a midnight meeting on October 31st at the HDH Club. The scene shifts to a woman's hideout, filled with alcohol, fast food, and pills. A family photo and scattered clothes lay amidst the mess. A security guard wakes her, scolding her for parking overnight. After some pleading, the guard relents. In the amusement park's deserted parking lot, only No Yule's car remains, as she has nowhere else to go. Back inside, the main character checks Jun-ho's background information and recognizes him. Jun-ho recalls their encounter on the small island and mentions cleaning up the aftermath of the dormitory brawl. Learning that Jun-ho was one of their underlings, Gi-hun becomes wary. Jun-ho explains he infiltrated the game's disguise to find his brother. A masked man had asked Gi-hun about someone named Hwangin-ho. Indeed, Gi-hun had gained an unexpected ally. He explained that the unconscious man recruited players for the game and, having lost a bet, was sacrificed. Gi-hun revealed his plan to end the horrific games, the first step being to meet the game's supervisor. Jun-ho mentioned the VIPs who enjoyed the spectacle and promised to help Gi-hun after being untied. Woo Seok immediately warned his new boss not to trust the cop, as his experience with the law had never been positive. Jun-ho mentioned the deaths on the island, asserting that having witnessed the hidden horrors, he could certainly help. Finally, the main character gains a new teammate, much to Woo Seok's disapproval, who tries to intervene. Gi-hun leads them to a room filled with the blood-soaked fortune of his fallen comrades, declaring he'll use this money to fight back. If successful, he'll share a significant portion with his two allies. From now on, the three musketeers would share both fortune and misfortune. Next, they enter a room stocked with an arsenal Seong Gi-hun has amassed. He asks Woo Seok to gather skilled gunmen for the upcoming battle. Jun-ho expresses doubt, prompting Gi-hun to give an impressive firearms demonstration. Unexpectedly, he had already prepared a shooting range, suggesting his revenge plan has been long in the making, waiting for the right moment. The next morning, while playing, the little girl in the strawberry hat watched a parade of people in mascot costumes. The little pig mascot handed out candy to the children, bypassing her. Only when the bunny mascot patted her shoulder and gave her a piece of candy did she smile. After the parade, the performers went into a room, removing their masks and complaining about the harsh weather. No Yule also took off her bunny head. Suddenly, the little girl in the strawberry hat opened the door and walked in, causing them to quickly put their animal heads back on. The girl approached the bunny and gave them a drawing of the two of them. The bunny thanked her, accidentally revealing scars on their wrist. As they fumbled to hide them, a colleague entered, removing his pig mask. Seeing the man inside the pig costume, the little girl burst into tears, likely experiencing her first real shock. Hearing someone call for Na-yeon, a father rushed in and carried his daughter away. The man in the pig costume wondered when the girl had been released from the hospital. She was the daughter of the portrait artist who worked in the park. Everything seemed normal until he heard someone mention the little girl had leukemia. No Yule froze, staring at the drawing the girl had given her. At the same time, the male lead secretly stood in a corner of the market, watching his foster mother for what he believed to be the last time. Young Kang Cheol, now grown up, had just returned from school. Grandmother and grandson relied on each other, giving him some peace of mind. He then went to a detective agency to find the relatives of Sae Byuk, the unfortunate girl who lost in the previous game. Gi-hun spent a considerable amount of money to ensure their safety and then gave Sae Byuk's brother's location to the detective, along with some final instructions. As he left, a woman entered the office, asking the detective to find her daughter. It was No Yule, who, entangled in a case involving the murder of her superior, had defected to South Korea and tragically lost her one-year-old daughter in North Korea. This put the intermediary in a very difficult position. Even a large sum of money couldn't solve this case. Although asking a mother to forget her own child was cruel, he advised No Yule to do so and live out the rest of her life. That night, she sat in her car, staring blankly at a photo of her beloved family, crying. Overwhelmed with grief, she took some pills with alcohol. Suddenly, a flashlight shone on her. As No Yule prepared to drive away, the person called her name, handed her a business card, and silently left. The next scene shifts to the anniversary of Hwang In-ho's wife's death. Jun-ho visited his sister's grave and received a message from his mother. She hoped that if In-ho were still alive, he would bring flowers on his wife's death anniversary. But he didn't. Jun-ho returned home to his mother's lamentations. After so many years without any news of her son, she believed In-ho resented her and wanted to sever ties with the family. She blamed herself every day, leading to a mental breakdown. This drove Jun-ho crazy. The next morning, little Na-yeon went to the park to wait for the rabbit, but was ignored. The person in the rabbit costume, No Yule, had resigned from her job. Despite attempts to dissuade her, No Yule remained firm in her decision to quit without explanation. Outside, the artist overheard the sound of an ambulance siren and immediately ran towards it. Coincidentally, No Yule, just stepping outside, witnessed the scene. As they left, No Yule quietly picked up the little girl's strawberry hat. She visited the injured girl at a nearby hospital, perhaps overwhelmed by a surge of maternal instinct. When the girl's father returned to the room, he found only the strawberry hat placed neatly on his daughter. Meanwhile, Gi-hun hired someone to extract his wisdom tooth and replace it with a GPS tracker. He was determined to use the tracker to infiltrate the island and take revenge on the murderous thugs. Woo-seok then brought in the country's top snipers. Gi-hun instructed the team to be cautious in every move. Jun-ho, whose identity had been exposed on the island, would provide support from the outside. He made a poignant call to his daughter, listening to her voice but unable to speak. No Yule resolutely decided to contact the number on the business card. She firmly stated her name and date of birth, confirming her participation in the game. The pickup point was the Tanshin parking lot under the Banjun Bridge. She burned the business card and the drawing Na-yeon had given her. On the evening of October 31st, Halloween, Gi-hun waited at the designated location. Perhaps the masked figures chose Halloween to blend in and conceal their identities. Right on time, he and Woo-seok entered the venue to search for people. To blend in with the festive atmosphere, Woo-seok decided to wear a horse mask. Despite the chaotic environment inside, Gi-hun persistently searched. Outside, Jun-ho recognized two henchmen in hot pink suits and reported their presence to his colleagues. He also infiltrated the venue to provide support but was stopped by the gatekeeper. "Get out of the way, I'm a police officer." Even police officers have to wait. Only when Jun-ho brandished his weapon did the guard obediently step aside. Inside, Gi-hun was led away by a pink-clad guard. Woo-seok, after informing Jun-ho of this, was tasered and rendered unconscious. Jun-ho found his colleague unconscious and, noticing Gi-hun's GPS signal moving away, alerted his team to prepare for action. Outside, the pink suit escorts the main character, Gi-hun, to a white limousine. Hesitating for a moment, Gi-hun gets in, leaving Jun-ho behind. Inside the luxurious car, a pig-shaped speaker is connected to the front man, the masked figure behind the games. He reminisces about a time they shared in a similar car. Gi-hun calmly remarks that this car seems even more luxurious than he remembers. The front man expresses his hope that Gi-hun will forget everything that happened and live a happy life, surprising Gi-hun with his apparent concern. Gi-hun sarcastically replies that he's so touched he could cry. The front man suggests Gi-hun should have taken the flight he was offered. Without further ado, Gi-hun demands that the games be stopped. The front man argues that he merely created the games, and everyone participated voluntarily. Gi-hun angrily retorts that they manipulate people at the bottom of society, forcing them into deadly situations for the amusement of the rich. The front man dismisses them as pathetic losers, societal trash eliminated from the game, claiming that the world produces more such trash every day. He declares that as long as the world remains unchanged, the games will continue. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out. The heavily armed convoy following Gi-hun is ambushed by a sniper who takes out the lead car with a single shot. The attack halts the pursuit, preventing them from following Gi-hun. Hearing the commotion, Gi-hun tells the front man to stop the car and return fire. The limousine, however, appears largely unaffected. When the front man asks if Gi-hun thinks he can stop the games with a single gun, Gi-hun seems to have an epiphany. He throws down the gun and demands to be allowed to play the game again. The front man is stunned by Gi-hun's decision to return to the games he so vehemently despises. Meanwhile, Jun-ho, still outside, overhears their conversation. Seeing the front man's silence, Jun-ho taunts, "Are you afraid you'll lose to me like you did to Oh Il-nam last time?" Even until his death, the old man refused to admit the truth. Despite knowing someone had come to help the homeless man, he wouldn't look out the window. But in his final moments, he surely knew he'd lost. The front man asks Gi-hun if he's seen The Matrix. They could have had peace by taking the blue pill, but chose the red pill to play the hero. He questions whether Gi-hun also fancies himself a savior of the world. Gi-hun declares that he will prove that the world doesn't always revolve around them. The front man accepts the challenge, stating that he will indulge Gi-hun's desire. A cloud of smoke fills the car, and Gi-hun loses consciousness. The window rolls down, revealing the front man to be the one driving. Outside, Jun-ho instructs his team to initiate Plan B. Meanwhile, Sae-byok's younger sister, No Yul, arrives at the designated location under the bridge and approaches a shipping container. She enters room number 011 and puts on a feminine pink outfit, complete with a triangle emblazoned hat. Gi-hun opened his eyes to find himself in a game designated as player 456. As he got out of bed, he encountered a seemingly mystical woman, player 044. She approached him, wanting to get acquainted, and declared he was burdened by bad karma that needed resolving. She proposed that if they cooperated and won the game, she would help him cleanse it. Before Gi-hun could process this strange encounter, a guard appeared and announced the rules. Over the next 6 days, everyone would participate in 6 different games. The winner would receive valuable prizes. Some participants questioned why the staff were masked and covered head to toe, while the players felt like they were being held captive. The guard explained that the uniforms and assigned numbers were for maintaining confidentiality and ensuring fairness. Another player asked why their phones and personal belongings had been confiscated, as everyone needed them. Unable to address every question individually, the guard revealed the players' shared circumstance. They were all debtors in hiding from society, hoping to win the prize money to repay their debts. This revelation hit a nerve, silencing further complaints. A giant golden pig served as a receptacle for the prize money, a staggering 45.6 billion won. This season's rules included a new twist. After each round, players could vote to continue or withdraw. Those who withdrew would receive a proportional sum and be released. Amidst the growing excitement, an elderly woman arrived, desperately trying to prevent her son from participating, sensing the inherent danger. However, overwhelmed by debt, he pleaded with her to let him play. Ignoring the commotion, the guard called for those committed to playing to line up and formally register. One by one, they eagerly signed up, drawn by the immense potential reward. Among them was Myung-gi, a cryptocurrency YouTuber who had been scammed and fallen into debt. Subong and a friend, former fans of Myung-gi's financial acumen, had also invested in cryptocurrency and suffered losses. Subong, seeking revenge and to recoup his money, confronted Myung-gi but, due to the crowd, decided to wait until after the game to settle the score. Finally, it was Gi-hun's turn. He hesitated as he read the terms and conditions, but under the guard's urging, he signed. Meanwhile, outside the game, Jun-ho and his colleagues, tracking a device implanted in Gi-hun's tooth, were on a boat approaching an island. Jun-ho ordered his subordinate to signal their impending arrival to the other team members. Back at the game, the players were led to a photo area. Subong, the rapper, attracted attention due to his fame, with many wanting to take pictures with him. However, the rules only permitted individual photos, leaving fans disappointed but hopeful for a post-game opportunity. Gi-hun, anxious about the impending game, was surprised to see his friend Young-bi. Reunited after 3 years, albeit under dire circumstances, Gi-hun urged Young-bi to follow his instructions to avoid any misfortune. The first game began. The players were brought to a large field, anticipating the challenge. Subong, spotting attractive women, began showing off and flirting, but was largely ignored. Suddenly, a giant doll appeared, surprising everyone. It announced the first game. Mogongnoa Keiko Sai Piat Sumanita red light, green light. Outside, the police, following the tracking device, finally reached their destination. However, the chip was inside a fishing lure, revealing that their plan had been compromised. Woo Seok urgently informed Jun-ho of the discovery. Inside, sensing trouble, Gi-hun checked his false tooth and found 2 fishhooks, realizing his precarious situation. Recalling his previous experience, Gi-hun frantically warned the other players about the game's deadly nature, describing it as a merciless killing machine. However, they dismissed him as a drunkard trying to cause chaos to win the prize money. The doll began the game. Gi-hun reiterated his warning. Remain perfectly still when the doll stopped speaking and avoid running, or face death. As the game progressed, Gi-hun yelled instructions, desperately trying to prevent casualties. The doll scanned the players, initially finding no violations. Then, a young woman, distracted by a bee on her neck, moved slightly. A single shot rang out, killing her instantly, right in front of Subong. Panic erupted, and several players attempted to flee, ignoring Gi-hun's warnings. They were swiftly shot down by the guards. Terrified, Subong took a stimulant to calm his nerves. Time ticked by. Gi-hun informed the remaining players that they would also die if they didn't reach the finish line in time. He explained that the doll could only detect movement in its direct line of sight, and suggested they form a human chain, largest to smallest, to minimize detection. Despite this strategy, many succumbed to fear and moved, meeting the same fate. In the final moments, several players successfully reached the finish line. However, one man was shot in the leg but remained alive. Gi-hun, unable to stand by, rushed back and dragged the injured man towards safety. But just as they reached the line, another shot rang out, killing the man. It became horrifyingly clear that even those incapacitated by the game would be eliminated. After the game ended, the guards were instructed to store their weapons and return to the waiting room for their next assignment. The surviving players, still shaken by the horrific events, were reeling from the near-death experience. The guards announced the conclusion of the first game. 91 eliminated, 365 remaining. Overcome with fear, the players pleaded to withdraw from the game. However, the guards revealed that the prize money for those who survived the first round was only 9.1 billion won. Divided equally, this amounted to a mere 21 million won per person. They further explained that each eliminated player represented 100 million won added to the pot. The lure of the full 45.6 billion won prize for surviving all rounds, coupled with their crippling debts, swayed many players to consider continuing. The voting process to determine whether the game would proceed to the second round began. Gi-hun was the first to vote. Without hesitation, he chose to quit, unwilling to witness further bloodshed. The vote revealed a clear divide between those who wanted to continue and those who wanted to leave. Seeing the growing number wanting to continue, Gi-hun intervened, desperately trying to persuade them that this wasn't a game, but a deadly trap. A heated argument erupted. Overwhelmed, Gi-hun revealed a shocking truth. He had participated in the game before. He claimed to be the sole survivor from 3 years prior, warning that if they didn't heed his advice, they would meet the same fate. Some believed him, others didn't. Subong even rallied the players to continue, suggesting that Gi-hun, with his experience, could lead them to victory and the grand prize. Gi-hun's desperate pleas were cut short by a guard, silencing the commotion. The voting resumed. One by one, the remaining players cast their votes. The tally remained incredibly close. Finally, only player Zizan remained. Both sides pinned their hopes on his decision. However, to everyone's surprise, Zizan chose to continue. Everyone had to line up to get their portion of food. But inside, Gi-hun was still incredibly upset after learning the result of the choice made by man Zizan. The protagonist took his food to his spot. Right behind him, 390, Young-bi, was walking towards Gi-hun. The older man wanted to feed Gi-hun, but he was lost in thought about what had just happened and paid no attention to anyone. Young-bi had no choice but to eat everything himself, not wanting to become a hungry ghost before dying. The older man felt that what had happened was okay. He didn't know how others felt, but Young-bi felt that 20 million won wasn't enough for the older man to pay his interest. Gi-hun was annoyed that Young-bi was thinking like that. He mentioned that last time he participated, someone else had said the same thing, and that person ended up dying here after saying that. Suddenly, a group of people approached them, led by Zizan, who knew that Gi-hun had played these games here before. The front man explained that he pressed the O button earlier because of him. In reality, Zizan had been very afraid and wanted to stop playing, but what Gi-hun said made him think he could play one more game. Upon hearing that, Gi-hun also revealed that the second game was dalgona, specifying that it was a type of sugar candy that you have to separate the shape from. There were 4 types, and the triangle was the easiest. Gi-hun was hesitant to bring up the fact that he almost died last time because he chose the umbrella shape by mistake. Later, with only the front man left, he questioned why Gi-hun had returned to this place. Wasn't he the final winner who received 45.6 billion won? Gi-hun replied angrily that the money wasn't his. It was money exchanged for the lives lost here. Furthermore, if Zizan had pressed the X button earlier, at least everyone here would have survived. Suddenly, 388 jumped in, asking to join the team as he wanted to stick together to survive the games. He introduced himself as Kang Di-ho, but no one paid him any attention. All of a sudden, Young-bi noticed that the young man had a tattoo of a former Marine on his arm. 388 looked at the older man's physique and felt amused, not expecting that this older man was also a soldier. Young-bi immediately took off his shirt to reveal a tattoo identical to his. Turns out, the older man was also a former Marine, and from an earlier batch. The young man, upon seeing this, immediately stood at attention and saluted his senior officer. At the same time, Nam Jayu and Subong went to bother Myung-gi. They both felt irritated that while everyone else was worried about death all around them, he was sitting here, eating happily. Immediately, the 3 of them started fighting in the middle of the room, 2 against 1. It was a sure thing that he'd be badly hurt. So Zizan intervened and stopped it. The 2 troublemakers thought he was just an old man, so they acted arrogantly. Little did they know that with just a few basic moves, the front man was able to beat those young punks until they were begging for mercy. Everyone standing there watching clapped and praised Zizan for acting so cool. That night, everyone was asleep except for a few who were still tossing and turning, lost in thought. At this time, the front man also went to Gi-hun to talk and apologize for his harsh words earlier. He explained that his wife had acute cirrhosis and needed a liver transplant, but when they did tests at the hospital, they found out she was pregnant. The doctor advised terminating the pregnancy, but his wife stubbornly wanted to keep the baby. Now, Zizan couldn't find a donor, so her condition was getting worse. He had borrowed as much money as he could, but it still wasn't enough. These games were Hashizuzen's last hope, even if it meant sacrificing human lives. He still wanted the money to take care of his wife and child. At the same time, the guards were rummaging through the bodies of the dead to see if anything useful could be salvaged. Unfortunately, only the eyes could be sold. Everything else was ruined because the bodies had been dead for too long. They discovered that someone had shot a second bullet into one victim's head to make sure they were dead. The vice commander found out about this, and the guards suspected that 011 was responsible. Immediately, No Yule was summoned to see the vice commander. He revealed that they had known each other for 7 years. Back then, she was in a cheap hospital room, staring blankly ahead like a corpse. Therefore, the vice commander wanted to give her a second chance and have her do what he said. No Yule felt grateful that he had taken her in, but she didn't want to listen to him, much less do evil things. The vice commander angrily stated that he had hired a doctor from the outside, so the situation was quite safe. She didn't have to worry about the commander finding out. Out of options, he brought up her lost child in North Korea. However, No Yule remained firm about her work. When they first met, the vice commander had said he was helping people who had no hope to pass away peacefully and escape their pain. She believed that, which is why she came here to work. At the police station, Jun-ho rushed inside to find his captain, begging for his help. Unfortunately, the captain scolded him for daring to submit a resignation without telling him anything. The captain had to beg his boss until he was blue in the face to get it changed to a leave of absence. Later, both of them went to the police chief's office to ask for permission to go to the island to investigate. If they didn't, Seong Gi-hun and all the other players would be in danger. The police chief thought he had been talking nonsense about this for years. The police work on hard evidence, so they should bring proof of it if it's true. Inspector H. Wang, realizing that asking for help from the police was useless, called Woo Seok so they could take matters into their own hands. If they split into 2 search teams, there might still be a chance. Now that the game had already started, they only had 5 days left, so they had to act immediately. The scene transitions to the start of the second game. Everyone, according to plan, heads straight for the triangle door, knowing it's supposed to be the easiest. Gi-hun, player 456, takes the lead, stepping forward to grab the candy box. To his shock, upon opening it, he finds it's a triangle-shaped maze. The others advance, and seeing this, they're completely defeated. This sugar candy game is just impossible. They immediately start cursing and blaming Gi-hun for tricking them into choosing the most dangerous shape, not the simple one he had claimed. The protagonist, terrified, can only stand there, frozen, listening to the accusations, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, Gi-hun snaps awake. It was all just a dream. Everyone else is waking up too, roused by the alarm in the room. They all head to the stairs, with the thought of the triangle shape still lingering in their minds. However, upon arriving, they realize the second game isn't about sugar candy at all. The others then lash out at Gi-hun for daring to guess the next challenge incorrectly. Luckily, player Zizan steps in to defend him, and they finally shut their mouths. Now, they need to form teams of 5, so Young-bi sends his subordinate, player 388, to find one more person to complete their team. Over on the other side, the older lady, Hyun-ju, is on a solo quest to find her own team, but seeing her face ID, people are hesitant to accept her. Meanwhile, the mother and daughter, Yong-sik and Ji-em-ya, are still searching diligently for a team. People are reluctant to take them in, believing the older woman to be too old and frail. Meanwhile, Subong, the leader of a group of arrogant guys, goes to find Si-mai, trying to invite her to his team. He waves his arms around, calling himself the rapper Thanos who has collected all 5 Infinity Stones, wanting nothing more than to protect this beautiful girl. However, Si-mai has already formed a team with Min-soo. Player 124 steps up to stop Subong, seeing how stupid this guy is, and that he couldn't be let on the team. Unexpectedly, he instantly gives in, accepting Min-soo, proving that for a girl, Subong can throw away his other considerations. On this side, the 388 crew has successfully recruited one person. Remarkably, he managed to find a former Navy man. With 5 members, the team is starting to look solid. Suddenly, Jun-hee appears, asking to join this group of older guys. Despite knowing they already have a full team, she announces that she's pregnant. The second game is about to begin. The rules are 5 people, 6 legs, all tied together, starting at the same time. Each team member must complete a small game at every 10-meter mark. If they succeed, the team can move to the next marker. There are small games at each marker, and they must complete them all to reach the finish line within 5 minutes to be successful. As the game starts, everyone is meticulously observing the other's failures, hoping to learn from their mistakes. Team 1 seems more successful in the paper slapping game, but because of the pressure during the rock throwing game, they ended up lengthening their time, allowing Team 2 to take the lead. In the game involving 5 pebbles, the older woman on Team 2 is very skilled, but due to time pressure, it takes her a while to finally complete it. The old man on Team 1 keeps making mistakes, unable to throw the rock, and they're becoming desperate in the face of impending elimination, causing the old man to urinate in his pants in fear. Team 2 is wasting a lot of time at the top spinning station. By the time both teams have only completed a few tasks, 5 minutes have already passed. Immediately, the warden steps out and shoots those who failed with a taser. Everyone waiting for their turn is terrified. Although they were able to observe and learn from others' mistakes, the psychological pressure is even greater. However, only Subong is still jumping around, because he had secretly hidden delicious candy in his necklace. When the crew found out, they asked for some, but Subong refused, fearing it was too potent for them to handle. Unexpectedly, Nam Jayu rolled up his sleeves, showing off his arm, and declared that he had played all sorts of things at his club. During the body disposal process, they suddenly discovered that the old man was still alive. The 2 wardens put him in a coffin and marked it, intending to harvest his organs. But then, a higher-ranking warden ordered them to open the coffin and found the old man still alive. So, he immediately tased him to ensure no one had a chance of survival. Next is the turn of Hyunju's team. She is now having conversations, introducing herself to everyone to reassure them. This team seems weak, as each person has distinct quirks. The arrogant Seon Nyo, who was a mage, is now shaking with fear at the thought of the taser. Hyunju believes they can do it, and they should make the later teams see that these games are nothing to worry about. From the very first round, the girl consistently failed at the paper flipping game. Luckily, her quick-witted aunt offered tactical advice and encouraged the group, helping them advance. Though they struggled in subsequent rounds, teamwork allowed them to progress easily. Unexpectedly, the shaman woman froze up, paralyzed by fear, and repeatedly failed. Seon Nyo was about to give up on her when a few sharp slaps from Aunt Hyunju snapped her back to reality. Next came the hacky sack game. For some reason, the aunt instructed everyone to turn away. They complied, nervously counting each kick. Surprisingly, this team, considered the weakest, was the first to succeed due to their collaborative efforts in challenging situations. Everyone in the room rejoiced at their triumph and survival. Following this, players relied on observation and learned from each other's experiences. Most progressed with relative ease, but some, due to time constraints or foolish mistakes, were ruthlessly eliminated. Finally, only 2 teams remained, including Gi-hun's. Though the audience had dwindled, the tension was palpable. Both teams cheered each other on, promising to meet at the finish line. As the competition restarted, player Zuzan was confident in his team, which included a previous winner. The girl aced the paper flipping game on her first try. The older man's stone throwing was smooth and flawless. The 5-pebble game caused concern, as it was considered easier for girls. However, with nimble hands, the young man succeeded in seconds. With plenty of time left, they continued their winning streak. Then, at a critical moment, player Zuzan faltered badly on his first attempt. Fortunately, the team remained optimistic. However, subsequent failures led to Zuzan furiously slapping himself. Gi-hun's encouragement finally helped him succeed. Only Gi-hun's hacky sack round remained. Everyone watched with bated breath. Just 1 kick away from victory, disaster struck. Quick-thinking player Zuzan extended his own leg, which was connected to Gi-hun's. Together, they reached the finish line with a single second to spare. Overjoyed, they wept with relief. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, revealing the other team's failure. Later, in the viewing room, old woman Jeom-ja questioned Hyunju's instructions to turn away during the hacky sack game. Hyunju, embarrassed, admitted to needing further surgeries, leading Jeom-ya to realize why it looked so large. Gi-hun's team entered, but an eerie silence fell over the room. Meanwhile, a front man entered his quarters only to be confronted by player 011, restrained by 2 guards. They warned her not to interfere further, revealing that she had eliminated players still in the game, preventing organ harvesting. Back in the waiting room, the front man announced the results of the second game. Players complained about the meager winnings for such a deadly competition. The front man initiated a vote to determine whether the games would continue. After 2 brutal rounds, many wanted to quit, but others, driven by greed, voted to continue for the larger prize. Some felt coerced to participate, creating a slight imbalance in the vote. Gi-hun, sensing trouble, tried to intervene. Suddenly, player Zizan-1 launched into a passionate plea for humanity, questioning their willingness to continue after witnessing so much death. However, player 100, undeterred, boasted about the increasing stakes and prize money. Seduced by wealth, most agreed to play another round before reconsidering their decision. At mealtime, the mother and son were at odds. She had urged him to stop, but he insisted on continuing. It turned out Yang Sik owed another small sum, around 100 million won, borrowed at a high interest rate. The loan sharks threatened to harvest his organs if he didn't repay next month. Meanwhile, Gi-hun's group ate, but Young-bi sat alone, withdrawn and reluctant. Di-ho coaxed the truth out of him. Young-bi had voted to continue the games and felt ashamed. Fortunately, the vote was irreversible. As the group discussed the next game and offered encouragement, Gi-hun warned they might die. Player Zizan-1, finding Gi-hun too pessimistic, rallied everyone to stay positive, eat well, and give their all. Simultaneously, Aunt Hyeon-ju, contrary to her teammates, had also voted to continue. She began to share her life story. Before revealing her true self, everything had been fine. Despite some curious glances, she faced no significant issues. However, after confessing her desire to transition, everything changed. Her mother cried, her father cut off contact, she lost her job, and friends distanced themselves. Now, she faced ongoing treatments and surgeries, mounting debt due to lost income. Though feeling free, Hyeon-ju's life had become much harder. That night, as everyone prepared for bed, Gi-hun worried about the team's safety. He remembered the previous night's horrific massacre in the same dormitory, fueled by desperation. Tonight, they would take turns keeping watch. Later, Jun-hee needed the restroom, but venturing alone was dangerous. Player Jang offered to accompany her. However, a guard enforced curfew, refusing passage. After Jang's dramatic pleas and tears, the guard relented. Hyeon-ju also appeared and was allowed to go, likely because the guard perceived her as female. Meanwhile, Gi-hun stood guard with Young-bi. Young-bi apologized for refusing Gi-hun a loan for his mother's medical treatment, explaining he had been penniless. Gi-hun, knowing his actions, not Young-bi's, had led to his mother's death, held no resentment. He returned not for the money, but to end the games, though he was unsure how. In the restroom, Hyeon-ju admired her reflection. Player Jang entered, noticing Jun-hee's absence. Knocking revealed Jun-hee, overwhelmed, crying silently alone. Jang, learning of her pregnancy and absent mother, comforted her maternally, offering a sense of warmth and support. The next morning, Detective H. Wang dispatched 2 teams to the island, aiming to rescue everyone, especially Seong Gi-hun. In the dormitory, an alarm jolted everyone awake, signaling preparations for the third game. Su-bong and Nam Jae relied on dalgona candy for composure. The third game required forming teams. Players stood on a central platform that would rotate. A number would be announced, and within 30 seconds, players had to form groups of that size and enter a designated room. Gi-hun's group strategized, unsure of the number and how best to divide themselves. If the number was less than 5, they would adapt. Above all, they agreed to stay calm, trust each other, and aim to return home safely. After a period of spinning, it stopped at the number 10. Everyone went absolutely crazy, scrambling to find their teammates and squeeze into the designated rooms. After a frantic search, Gi-hun's team managed to secure a room with all 10 members safe inside. The door locked, and the countdown timer ended. The Squid Game guards immediately stormed in and unleashed a hail of bullets upon those left outside. Witnessing this carnage, Gi-hun was in shock and speechless. Inside, player number 44, Guk-hee, started causing a commotion. She claimed that Gi-hun's longer lifespan was not without reason, and that he was brought here with some hidden purpose. Outside, after ensuring no one remained alive, the Squid Game guards brought in coffins to haul the bodies away for cremation. This marked the beginning of the second round. Everyone looked visibly worried, except for the ever-confident Top and his sidekick. This time, the number was 4. Without hesitation, Top kicked Jong-soo aside and rushed into a room with his 3 followers. Hyun-ju's group abandoned the old woman Go-ki, while Gi-hun's number 1 decided to leave, seeking out a new team. After the time limit expired, and they were all inside, Top became delusional, claiming his followers left Jong-soo behind. The guy even put on a fake crying act for the guy he just pushed aside. On the other side, the guards discovered that room 33 had only 3 people, not 4, so they immediately shot them. When the time was up, everyone moved back outside. Hyun-ju's group was terrified by the murderous glare of Go-ki, while Gi-hun looked pleased that number 1 had survived. They all started joking around that if the next round was for 6 people, they wouldn't need anyone else since Jun-hee was pregnant. The third round started, and the number 3 was announced. Hyun-jae's group split up, each searching for teams. Top made Si-mai and Min-so play rock paper scissors to decide who he would pick. Si-mai wanted to find a new group with her friend, but unexpectedly Min-so betrayed her and ran after the comedian. During the search, the kid in the mom-son group was forcefully pulled into a room by 2 strangers, leaving the mom alone. She was rescued by Gi-hun and number 1 just in the nick of time. Inside the room, the mom quickly thanked the 2 of them for saving her life. When number 1 asked where her son was, she didn't know what to say. Upon hearing number 1 say Young-sik was a terrible son, she got angry and defended her son, saying he wasn't that kind of person. When the room door opened, Min-so looked at Si-mai, visibly frightened, realizing she'd just abandoned her friend to save herself. The mom ran to her son, and they decided to forgive each other in Young-sik's repentance. In the next round, the mother and son decided to hold hands until death. The number 6 was announced, and the group immediately scrambled to organize into groups. In the chaos of getting to the room, Young-min fell. In the final seconds, Myung-gi managed to get inside, and Young-min died, to everyone's dismay. Hyun-ju was enraged and blamed Myung-gi, but he said that if he hadn't gotten inside, they would all be dead, not just her, and Jun-hee agreed with him. The final round was started. Number 1 believed the next number would be 2. There were currently 126 people left, but only 50 rooms. Even with 2 people per room, only 100 could fit. Therefore, this last round would only let those who got into a room first survive. As expected, the number 2 was announced. Everyone frantically ran for a room. This time, the comedian Top chose his closest follower to go inside, leaving Mi-soo behind. The scenes of people trying to find a room became chaotic. After a while, Gi-hun's group managed to secure a room. In order to survive, number 1 didn't hesitate to get rid of a person, reducing 3 people to 2. While taking the coffins away, it appeared that someone had survived and escaped. Outside, the police were using drones to survey the island. Everyone returned to their rooms to rest. Over to the side, Myung-gi pulled Jun-hee aside to talk. He wanted them to start over after they got out. He hoped Jun-hee would give him one last chance. Then, he painted a beautiful picture, saying that once they were out, Jun-hee could have their child, and Myung-gi promised he would take good care of them both. He had calculated that the remaining players would each receive between 300 and 400 million won. He figured many would want to leave, so they would be sure to win the next vote. After they got out, Myung-gi would use their money to pay off his debts and invest, promising it would be profitable, unlike his previous failures. It sounded convincing, but no matter what, Jun-hee was adamant in her refusal and walked away. Top the comedian was delighted to see Min-soo again after kicking that guy out of the team in the last game. Meanwhile, the old lady, Go-ki, went to Hyun-ju's group to cause trouble, cursing them to die in the next round. In another corner, Gi-hun's group counted the numbers and found that 56 people had voted to continue playing. This was a difference of 12 people. Without much discussion, they decided to come up with a plan to persuade others. If 7 people would listen, the X side would win. However, number 1 argued that it was impossible, because most people who chose O definitely wanted to keep playing. How could they stop the greed of those people? If they tried to persuade them now, it was highly likely a big fight would break out before the vote. As things grew tense, Gi-hun and number 1 started arguing. Seeing the situation escalate, number 390 stepped in to comfort them, promising he would choose X instead of O. Di-ho also tried to persuade them, and things finally calmed down. Just then, the guards came in to announce the results of the third game. Outside, after a search, the police team found something suspicious. Without hesitation, the captain decided to go there to investigate. The total prize money after the third round was 356 million won, and the voting started, following the player numbers from the bottom up. Gi-hun was the first to vote, of course choosing X. The next players came to vote, and it seemed that the O side had the advantage. Number 390, the older gentleman, chose X instead of O. Simai also abandoned O for X, which infuriated Top the comedian. Over with the Squid Game guards, it turned out that number 11 was Yong-min. Back to the voting, the comedian didn't disappoint with his dramatic voting gestures. After a bit of voting, some people switched from O to X. Down below, a mother begged her son, Yong-sik, not to do anything foolish again before she ran up to vote. Meanwhile, Top the comedian and his sidekick were encouraging Mai-soo to choose O for another game, but the guy ended up ditching them and choosing X, following Simai. Right now, with just 2 more turns, Team X would reach 50 votes. Outside, the investigation team had reached the secret bunker. They were about to open the door and rush in when, whoa, it turned out to be a bomb, surprising everyone on the ship. The score at this point was 48 for Team O versus 47 for Team X, a difference of 1. The next turn was number 15, and luckily the guy decided to cut ties and choose X. Now the score was tied. Next, number 09 chose O, making the green team cheer. Now it was Yong-sik's turn, and this time, he decided not to take any more chances, choosing X, which made his mother sigh in relief. Next up was number 06. She'd picked X before, so everyone thought they were about to go home, to everyone's delight. At this moment, number 390 told Gi-hun that he noticed something strange when he was in the room with number 1. He was about to explain when the old lady, number 06, unexpectedly chose O, leaving everyone speechless. It turned out she was convinced by Goki. The score was now 50-49 in favor of Team O. The last turn was number 1. Gi-hun was extremely worried about his teammates' hesitation. After a while, number 1 chose O, and everyone sighed in relief. The guards announced that with a tie score of 50-50, there would be a revote the next day to give everyone time to think. Outside, the police team had lost a colleague, but even in their grief, they would continue without stopping. During mealtime, Gi-hun asked number 390 about number 1, but he was ignored and told to just forget about it like it never happened. Putting this matter aside, everyone decided to brainstorm how to convince the people on Team O to switch sides tomorrow. Yong-sik's mom declared that victory would belong to Team X, because how could one seaweed rice roll be enough? By morning, everyone would be groaning with hunger, and when people are hungry, they usually yearn for home. Hearing this, Yong-sik bravely stood up and invited the people on Team O to defect. The young man brought up family sentiments to persuade them, but unexpectedly, he was completely ripped to shreds by Uncle 100. Just like that, both teams started shouting at each other back and forth. It was so awful that the whole bunch ended up dragging each other to the dividing line for a vocal battle just for fun. Suddenly, at this moment, Jae-hun sensed something fishy because there was a fork in his rice roll. In the bathroom, comedian Top and his sidekick started looking for Min-soo to persuade him. They wanted him to abandon Team X for Team O no matter what tomorrow. Comedian Top passionately persuaded him by recounting his past. He wanted Min-soo to understand him and follow him so that his parents would be proud. Right at this moment, Myung-gi appeared, putting an end to this comedy show. Without saying much, Myung-gi yelled out to the people around them that Top and his sidekick were trying to force people to vote for Team O next time. Not willing to give in, the comedian called out to his brothers in his team for backup. Just like that, an argument broke out in the bathroom. Comedian Top and his henchmen, thinking that this guy had brain damage, started mocking Myung-gi and Jun-hee. Hearing this, Myung immediately got angry and started a one-on-one shouting match with the two comedians. Feeling that they could no longer express themselves with words, the two teams rushed in to start punching each other. Min-soo, seeing this scene, got scared and quickly ran away. Myung-gi got beaten to a pulp by the comedian. During this life or death situation, Myung-gi did something to the comedian. Choi Subong was stabbed and collapsed. Myung-gi, trembling, kicked away the hand gripping his leg and crawled into the bathroom, locking the door. Outside, the two factions continued to brawl fiercely. Nam Jae-yu, knocked to the floor, grabbed the fork protruding from Choi Subong's neck and wildly stabbed his opponent. The guard at the bathroom door, though hearing the commotion inside, didn't intervene. In the main hall, the loudspeaker announced the names of those just eliminated, and more money poured into the prize pot, leaving everyone bewildered and unsure of what had happened. As the door opened, Nam Jae-yu loudly accused Team X of attacking Team O in the bathroom, aiming to eliminate them all to win the next day's vote. Team X denied this accusation and retorted, claiming Team O started the fight. However, everyone was only concerned with which side had suffered more casualties and immediately began recounting the dead. At midnight, the policeman, unable to sleep due to his earlier drinking, went out to the ship's deck to vomit. Hearing a noise, he noticed Captain Park tampering with everyone's drone. Suspicious, the policeman asked him who he really was. Before he could finish his question, Captain Park stabbed him repeatedly and threw him overboard. Director Choi, awakened by the commotion, came out to investigate. Park quickly claimed it was just the waves hitting the deck and urged him to go back to sleep. In the main hall, Team Blue, after counting, had 47 remaining members, with 3 deaths. Team Red had only 2 deaths, leaving 48 members. Provided no one changed their minds tomorrow, their chances of returning home were high. The loudspeaker announced that everyone had 30 minutes to sleep. Elsewhere, a game manager radioed his superior that the delivery team had departed, and the bitch would be compliant within an hour and cause no further problems. Upon hearing this, the boss stepped outside and ordered all game managers to prepare to begin the special game. The loudspeaker announced that the pink-suited team should line up and proceed outside. With only 20 minutes left before lights out, D-Ho, noticing suspicious activity from Team O, quickly reported it to his group. Gi-hun, upon hearing this, asserted that the other side would attack them when the lights went out. If they eliminated them, they could win the vote and increase the prize money. While they were still unsure how to defend themselves, Young Roman II urged their team to attack first. Since their side consisted mostly of women and the elderly, a surprise attack would give them a higher chance of winning. Gi-hun immediately objected, arguing that victory didn't require killing. If they slaughtered each other, wouldn't they be playing right into the hands of those in charge? He urged everyone to unite and eliminate the black-masked overseers, not each other. Young Roman II retorted, "But how can we fight back against their guns?" The guards had begun moving to their designated location for the special game. Gi-hun continued, "We can seize the mask's guns to fight back." Young Roman II remained unconvinced, arguing that it was too risky as they were outnumbered. Gi-hun persisted, trying to persuade everyone that a surprise attack would give them a high chance of success. Moreover, this was their last chance to end these games permanently. Young Roman II finally asked how they could seize the guns. Gi-hun replied that they would have an opportunity during the night's chaos. The pink-suited team reached the door. Simultaneously, the loudspeaker announced that lights out was in 5 minutes. Everyone hurried to their sleeping positions. Nam Jae-yu, anticipating an imminent brawl, nervously chewed on candies to calm his nerves, clutching the fork that had already taken 2 lives. Yuri found Myung-gi and told him to hide when the lights went out and not to come out no matter what happened. As predicted, when the lights extinguished, the main hall became a slaughterhouse. Team O, with their advantage of being all able-bodied young men, relentlessly attacked and eliminated the weaker women of Team X. Those who had gathered with Gi-hun, following his plan, stealthily hid under the beds, avoiding the riot. They knew that if even a few people died or were injured, their entire plan would crumble. They had to sacrifice the unknowing members of Team X to preserve their fighting force. And so, the group lay silently under the beds, waiting for the chaos to end. Nam Jae-yu, seizing the opportunity, cornered and killed Sae Byok for looking down on him earlier. Just as Gi-hun predicted, the riot didn't last long. The pink soldiers didn't want everyone dead, which would end the game prematurely. The lights came back on, and they swarmed in to quell the violence, then scanned the dead players' information. Seizing this moment, Gi-hun's group sprang out, overpowered the guards, and seized their guns, shooting them down. A fierce firefight ensued, and pink soldiers fell one after another. The leader, worried, quickly ordered a retreat. However, one pink soldier was left outside the door. Player 456, enraged, ran towards him, gun raised, intending to make him pay, but Gi-hun intervened. He argued that if they did that, they would be no different from the masked men. Gi-hun then rallied everyone. They shot out the surveillance cameras and collected the weapons from the dead guards. In the control room, the front man ordered all soldiers to assemble at a central point, armed. Outside in the hall, Gi-hun announced, "We're going upstairs to the masked men's headquarters to capture those who captured us and end this game. Anyone who wants to use a gun and join us, step forward." However, no one moved. Yuri even shook her head at Myung-gae, signaling him not to go. Lee Young-yi then stepped forward, passionately urging everyone, "Let's fight together and go home together." A few hands went up, pledging to join. Curly-haired Yang-sik started to step forward, but was stopped by his mother. Seeing no one else willing to join, Gi-hun ordered everyone to check their weapons and take a walkie-talkie. He also thanked young Roman II for taking the initiative, which encouraged others to join the fight. Player Season 1 then stepped forward and instructed everyone on how to load and use the guns. Once finished, Gi-hun forced the kneeling pink soldier to remove his mask, revealing a very young man. He then pointed his gun and forced the young man to lead them to the command center. They breached the door and entered. As they stepped onto the stairs, the loudspeaker blared, urging the players to return to their beds. Immediately afterward, gunfire erupted from pink soldiers lying in wait. The group ducked for cover. Fortunately, player Season 1, a former ROK Special Forces sergeant, was provided cover fire while she moved to a better vantage point and systematically eliminated the enemy. The team ceased fire and continued up the stairs. Surveillance cameras went offline one by one. The front man frantically ordered his subordinates to set an ambush, preventing the group from reaching the control area. Arriving at the location, the captured pink soldier explained that the management area was just around the corner, with the control room above, but they needed masks to enter. He nervously pulled a mask from his pocket just as he was shot dead. The pink soldiers ambushing on the opposite side opened fire on Gi-hun's group. Seeing the dire situation, Gi-hun announced he would search for the entrance to the management area with Young-bi, while young Roman II and the others bought them time. The two searched the rooms but found them empty. Outside, D-ho, too scared to expose himself, fired blindly, quickly depleting his ammunition without hitting anyone, prompting a teammate to remind him to conserve bullets. Inside, using the retrieved mask, Gi-hun successfully opened the door to the management area. Young-bi asked why Gi-hun chose him to come along, to which Gi-hun simply replied, "Because you're my friend." Just then, they were attacked by ambushing pink soldiers. Thinking quickly, Gi-hun used the mask as a decoy to reveal their positions, allowing Young-bi to shoot them down. The two proceeded up the stairs, collecting ammunition as they went. The front man in the control room again ordered the upper stairway to the control room secured, and soldiers were immediately dispatched to set up an ambush. Outside, the remaining players grew impatient, wanting to advance rather than continue the firefight. However, young Roman II cautioned that advancing without a plan would leave them vulnerable and urged them to wait. Inside, Gi-hun and Young-bi continued to exchange fire. Hyun-ju called out for everyone to check their remaining ammunition, as everyone was running low. Just then, Young-bi radioed that they were right below the control room, requesting backup and ammunition. He informed them that there was ammunition in the soldiers' bags in the break room. Upon hearing this, young Roman II called for 2 volunteers to join him in going upstairs. D-ho nervously volunteered to retrieve more ammunition from the break room. Unable to wait any longer, Gi-hun left Young-bi to hold the line while he rushed out to collect ammunition from the dead guards. Meanwhile, D-ho, overwhelmed by fear upon hearing the gunfire, ignored Hyun-ju's pleas over the radio and discarded the walkie-talkie, abandoning the mission to retrieve ammunition. With no other option, Hyun-ju volunteered to go to the break room herself. Young Yai's group found the rear entrance. He signaled his 2 teammates to go ahead and set up an ambush while he provided cover for the pink soldiers. Young Roman II shot his own teammates, then radioed Gi-hun, falsely claiming they had been eliminated. He saw one teammate still moving and attempted another shot, but found himself out of ammunition. He then pulled out the magazine Gi-hun had given him earlier, loaded it, and finished the job. Ironically, he switched channels and told someone it was time to clean up. Hyun-ju reached the break room and found a terrified Di-ho hiding in a corner. As she prepared to grab the ammunition and leave, she saw pink soldiers gathered at the door. She prepared to fight them alone but was stopped by Young-sik's mother, who urged her not to die that way. Upstairs, the 3 remaining players finally ran out of ammunition. Overwhelmed, player 324 chose suicide. The remaining 2 surrendered, hoping to survive, but the pink soldiers showed no mercy, executing players 145 and 246. Meanwhile, Gi-hun and Young-bi, out of ammunition and informed of their teammates' surrender, had no choice but to kneel and concede. The front man descended the stairs. He coldly asked player 456 if he enjoyed playing the hero and to take a good look at the consequences. He then turned and shot Young-bi dead right in front of Gi-hun. Enraged, Gi-hun lunged at the front man to avenge his friend, but was restrained by the guards. His anguished cries mingled with the cold announcement from the system. Player 390 eliminated.